Welcome back to the tailgate. It's been about a day. Polls came out about an hour ago at the time I'm recording this. I'm recording this on Tuesday, and they just came out, so let's go ahead and take a look at them. So yeah, welcome back to the tailgate. It's a Wednesday morning at the time this video is posted. The polls came out yesterday night, and we're going to take a look at them and compare them to mine. And we're going to start right now. As you know, the polls look different because mine is made on Google Sheets, so there's no confusion, hopefully. Looking at the polls, I think they're pretty solid, but I think a lot of the complaints I had last week are still here. However, when we look at the top 5, it's extremely similar, as I have moved Georgia back up to number 1 after their amazing win against Ole Miss, and I dropped Ohio State down to 2. Not that their win wasn't impressive, but Georgia just obliterated a top 10 team, so I think they're warrant the number 1 spot now. I bumped Michigan all the way up. I jumped Michigan back up to 3 because they finally had their big win against Penn State, which I've been waiting for. And since Florida State has been playing a lot of great teams recently, and with them struggling some of these games, I dropped them down actually to 5, as with Washington picking up a lot of big wins recently. I think Washington is the 4th best team in the country now. So that is the top 5, as Georgia's back at number 1, and Florida State is the first team left out. And the only difference with my top 5 compared to the polls top 5 is that Washington and Florida State are swapped. At 6, we both have Oregon. I mean, that's pretty easy. Of course, the same thing here. The same difference from last week. I have Bama at 7 and Texas at 8, where the polls had that swapped. And then at 9, I have Louisville and Missouri at 10, which the polls have swapped. They are very close, but it's just with Missouri having 2 losses, just a slight edge I'm giving to Louisville, as they're 9-1. I know they don't have the wins that Missouri does, and they definitely don't have the same quality of losses, but it's just they don't have 2 losses, so I think putting Missouri right there at 10 is fair. And that wraps up the top 10. Now 11 through 15 is very similar, as I have Oregon State at 11 and Penn State at 12, which is the same as the polls. And then I have LSU at 15, same with the polls. I think top 15 is a good spot for LSU. And then I don't think Oregon State is truly a top 10 team yet. I don't think they're better than Louisville or Missouri, so I think 11 is a great spot for them. And then Penn State isn't a top 10 team. Those 2 bad losses to Ohio State and Michigan kind of prove that. The only difference with my polls is that I have Oklahoma at 13 and Ole Miss at 14, where the polls have that swapped. The reason for that was mainly because I had Ole Miss ranked 1 spot lower than the polls, while they both dropped the exact same amount, which I think was, they dropped 4 spots in the playoff polls, which is the same as mine. But again, I had Ole Miss ranked lower, so I think that just kind of is why. And then Oklahoma had a really impressive win, so I think as of right now they're better than Ole Miss slightly. However, it's not a huge difference, and as you can see, the top 15 is almost the exact same except for that 1 slight change. It's the exact same teams, just that little difference. As always, the bottom 10 is when things get a little weird. Let's go ahead and start with 16. I have Utah, which is a big difference compared to 22 in the polls. Utah took Washington to the wire, and also I had Utah ranked a lot higher than the polls. They dropped 4 spots in their polls. They also dropped 4 spots in my poll, so it's the same drop, but it just ranked completely different. I think Utah is way better than 22nd in the country. I think 16 is a really good spot for them. Behind them, I have Tulane. Now, I know Tulane has not been playing that great, but they keep winning, and a lot of these teams keep on losing that are ahead of them. Not like a lot of teams, but the teams that are like 1 or 2 spots ahead of them keep on losing. So I really don't have any other reason to drop Tulane. I think they just keep on going up, eventually to the point where they do just stall out. And I think right here, 17 is probably where they will stall out. But I know they're not playing great, but since everyone else is losing, I think 17 is a good spot. Where I don't agree with really 24 at the polls, just because with so many teams losing, I think Tulane just deserves a little bit of a bump up. At 18, I have Arizona, which is 1 spot lower than the polls. Not a huge difference, but it's definitely there. And that's just because Tulane is right there instead of 24 at the polls. Behind them, I have Notre Dame at 19, same as the polls. That's a really good spot for them, in my opinion. And then at 20, I have James Madison. They have North Carolina ranked there. Again, I just think these polls are really discrediting these group of 5 teams. I mean, they're 10-0 and have barely had any tests this whole season. They haven't had really any close games. They've been steamrolling everybody. So, I mean, I know James Madison can't play in the bowl games or whatever. Maybe the reason they're not being ranked in the playoff polls is because they can't play any postseason games. Maybe that's why they're not in the rankings. But judging from the rest of the rankings, I don't think that's the case. So I don't really agree with James Madison not being ranked. I think 20 is a good spot for them. And I think North Carolina is ranked a little too high in my opinion. So I don't think 20 is a good spot for North Carolina. Rounding out my polls, I have Tennessee at 21 compared to 18 in the polls. This one, I don't agree with. I think they didn't drop Tennessee down enough. Tennessee lost by 29 to Missouri. Now I know Missouri is pretty good, but to lose like that, especially when you're favored, I think they deserve to drop way more than just 5 spots down to 18. I don't think they're a top 20 team anymore. I mean, those are some really bad losses and just really bad, so I don't think 18 is a good spot for them. At 22, I have Kansas compared to 25 in the polls. The reason that I have them ranked a little higher is because so many other teams losing, and I just think that 22 is a good spot for them right now. I know it was a really ugly loss, but I think 25 might be a little too low, and I kind of think it's a little ridiculous to drop them down 9 spots and Tennessee getting dropped less spots. I mean, I feel like Tennessee had a worse loss in my opinion, but 22 is a good spot. I think 25 is just a little too low, but I'm okay with it. At 23, I have North Carolina. I think 20 is a little high, but I'm not too mad at it. But 23 is a good spot for them. They just don't really have any big wins to stand out, but they are 8-2, so they deserve to be in the rankings. But I think 23 is a good spot. I think 20 might be a little too high. At 24, I have Liberty. Again, what I was saying is that these group of 5 teams are getting a little too discredited in my opinion. Again, Liberty's 10-0. They've been blowing out everybody. I know their conference and schedule is super weak, but you're 10-0 and you're blowing out everybody. It means you're pretty good. So, I mean, you should be in the rankings in my opinion. And to round it off at 25, I have Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State got a huge drop in the polls too, but not as much as mine. But that was because, I mean, Oklahoma still has some impressive wins to keep them in the rankings, but that loss was so bad that they were just barely in. And with them barely staying in, that kind of explains the reasoning for why I don't have K-State and Iowa ranked. Even though Oklahoma State had that really bad loss, I don't think Iowa's better than them because Iowa's offense is awful. And Oklahoma State beat K-State, so that's just usually that's kind of my logic that I'm sticking with for why I don't have K-State ranked. And I know K-State is ranked pretty high. I know Iowa's ranked really high too at 16, but Iowa is really suspect, and I just don't think. I think with all those teams at the bottom of the rankings not losing, and most of the teams in the middle of the rankings losing, I think that kind of takes Iowa and K-State's spot in my opinion. Again, recapping the polls, I think it's an alright poll. I think some teams might be ranked a little too high, mainly just Iowa, and I think mainly Iowa and Tennessee stand out as the teams that are ranked a little too high in my opinion. And then I think Utah is ranked too low in my opinion. And again, I think the group of 5 teams are getting severely discredited, which I'm not a fan of. But overall, I think it's a pretty alright poll, and I definitely agree with Georgia being the new number 1. We'll see how the season goes, but those are the polls. If you want to look at them more, feel free to pause. But that wraps up the polls. So yeah, that's the video. Hope y'all enjoyed. I'll be back tomorrow to do a prediction video on whatever games I can find that are somewhat interesting. I know that sounds super negative, but the week before rivalry week is usually pretty lackluster to say the least. So we'll see how many games I can get out of there. I'm hoping for at least 6 or 7, just to at least make it a good enough video and a long enough video to warrant making one, of course. I'm still gonna make one regardless, because I'm not gonna skip any more prediction videos, but I'm really hoping it's enough to warrant a video and not just feel like filler. But hope you enjoyed the video. Like, favorite, subscribe if you had, and I'll be back tomorrow to do that prediction video.